Roboski, and welcome to Talk Plus. This video is dedicated to the members of St. Mary's Basilica and Assumption parishes that may be shut in or have to have moved away with family for health reasons or personal reasons, or even members of our military who are all serving somewhere. We want you to know that you are still included in our thoughts and in our prayers. Now, today's episode is pretty exciting. We're going to take you to some places that very few members of St. Mary's Basilica or even people in Natchez have ever seen. Let's just say we're going to cover things from top to bottom and some very nice places in between. So thank you so much for joining us, and remember, we're keeping you in our prayers, so please to keep us in your prayers as well. Thank you. And here we are today with Jimmy Garcia in a part of St. Mary's Basilica that very few people have seen in many years. We are standing outside of the crypt, which is located, I guess you would call, in the basement of the church. Now, Jimmy, what exactly is a crypt?
A crypt is a part of the design for a cathedral, and it was intended to be the burial site of the bishops, whatever bishops were here. To our knowledge, only one bishop was buried here. He was the second bishop. He died in the rectory, and he was buried here for over 20 years. But then in his will, he specified he wanted to be buried with his Jesuit brothers in Missouri. So they finally came and got him in 1874. Bishop Vandervelde was here for 2 years. He came here as what we call an older man. He was in his 60s, and he fell down the steps of the rectory. And later through, we think, yellow fever, he actually died from suffering from the broken leg in the bed. That he dies of yellow fever, mosquito bites.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Now, the exciting part about this is probably one of the oldest parts of the church from when it was originally built so many years ago, but it's one of the newest projects of St. Mary's Catholic Historical Society. What many groups are involved in this? Well,
initially the idea for the restoration of the crypt came from Beth Bogus, Ruth Powell, and myself. We wrote a formal letter to Father O'Connor asking for the restoration of the crypt. So let's back up. For close to 75 years plus, the crypt was used as a trash room. It's something you didn't need. It was put in here, but you could hardly walk in there. The Christmas trees were stored in here for the nativity set. So in our proposal, we said to Father O'Connor, let's respect the crypt, let's restore it, let's get the trash out of here. So a month or two ago, the Building and Maintenance Committee came as a 6-man committee, and they had brought a dumpster and parked it in front of the church, and for 3 to 4 hours emptied the basilica, the crypt, of what we call trash, unwanted material that had just been stored there, taking up space. No one was using it. The archive committee had previously been here to label the valuable artifacts, so they knew what not to pick up and throw away.
Excellent. Well, this is a very exciting time of creating a new sacred space out of an old sacred space as it was originally intended. Let's go in and have a look at what's available to observe and to show respect in the crypt.
Let's do that. In the crypt, we have 3 main focal elements. We have Bishop Chance's altar. And we call it Bishop Chance's altar because this was the original altar for the cathedral upstairs. To bring it downstairs and use it in Saint Therese Chapel, it was cut down, so you're just looking at a remnant of it. We have a photograph here to show you what it looked like originally. So it stayed in Saint Therese Hall as an altar because it was the chapel done under Bishop Giroux. This is the burial site for Bishop Vandervelde. He died in 1855 after falling down the steps of the rectory. He broke his leg in several places, and he was in bed in the rectory and got bitten by mosquitoes, so he actually died of the yellow fever. He was buried here. The shape that you're looking at, what you're looking at now, is just the remnant of the tomb. It had an arched top, a dome top. Beth Boggess describes this like they do in New Orleans, and it was called an oven, made to look like European baking ovens. Bishop Vanderbilt made this in 1854. He had noticed when he came here the desecration of the old Spanish cemetery. And I use the word desecration because essentially the remnants of the bodies have been moved to the north side to the new cemetery. But in doing so, it was crudely arranged with possibly slave labor, horse or mules and carriages. And the bones fragments were all over the cemetery, and children and animals were playing with these bones. So he took it on himself to get permission from the city, and he did. And he gathered up the remnants and put them in this brick box.
Hello. I felt like talking to you for a few minutes and reflecting on my recent experience of having had major surgery and the recovery process, and just being able to acknowledge that illness makes major changes in our lives, and many times we are wearied by dealing with it. We have to begin by making doctor's appointment, then preparing for the appointment, then keeping the appointment, and then the follow-up afterwards of treatment or medicine or whatever it might be. And so the process is indeed wearying, and many of our congregation people are experiencing illness here in recent months, and I am very sensitive to the pressures that you might be experiencing. Now, in addition to what I've mentioned, I found when I had major surgery less than a year ago, a knee replacement, that I had somewhat unrealistic expectations about feeling well and fully recovered within 2 or 3 months. And then it came as maybe a disappointment, but gradually I adjusted to the fact that it would take 2 or 3 times that length of time. And so at this point I can say that I have recovered very well, and I'm fully back to work, and there are no activities that I can do that are needed for being the priest here at St. Mary or Assumption. I had, and many people going through illness might have had the same trouble of difficulty with sleep, and part of it probably was on a recliner all day, perhaps taking a nap now and again, and then at night not being able to sleep in the regular way. And that was created its own type of stress for me. In addition to that, of course, illness intervenes in one's social life, and it did very much in mine. I have the freedom to get up, go visit people in the hospital, go to the coffee shop, go meet people for conferences, and all of that got interrupted in a fairly major way for a few months. And again, I'm happy to say I'm at the other side of that, and very grateful to be as I am today. And then there's a sense of just simply well-being, feeling good for the most of the day, feeling energized enough to take on whatever I need to do, and that has been very important to me. There was a point at which I would find myself almost making an excuse why I wouldn't do something or be at a meeting, as the case may be. And generally, I'm an individual that enjoys the meetings and the ongoing work of being the priest here. So the blessing for me, however, and my hope is that anybody going through illness might have parallel experiences to that, was that I had two congregations who had a great interest in being supportive of me and helping me. You might not know that for about 2 months, maybe more than 2 months, there were different members of the congregation who brought me lunch and dinner each day, as well as those that generally watched over my well-being and made sure that I was eating well, sleeping well, and taking care of myself. And so what I'm doing in effect in talking to you is to acknowledge that illness, or in my case, recovery from surgery, was a whole lot more challenging than I had anticipated. And I am very grateful for the encouragement and the help that I got during that period, and the people who watched over me on a daily basis. Again, they made sure that I was staying on track with therapy and with food and with rest and sleeping and taking care of myself in general. And so I suppose my word for you, if you were dealing with illness, is to be patient with yourself, and to let the church people know that you need some help. And I have to acknowledge that my church people were very, very wonderful for me. So, I hope that that's some encouragement to you as you deal with your illness. The other thing that I guess was very powerful was many people would send prayer cards and wishing me well, praying for me, and I value that very much, because there were times during my recovery when for me to pray for myself was difficult. It was hard to focus my attention and concentration, and thank God that has come back, and so I feel blessed by that again. So those are my words for you today, and I appreciate the chance of talking with you.
Hello, I'm Megan Gatto, and this is Who's That Saint? Today we are going to look at St. Jude. St. Jude, also known as Jude Thaddeus, was one of the 12 apostles, and he is also supposed to be a relative of Jesus. St. Jude's attribute is a club. He is also often shown in statues and pictures with a flame around his head. This represents his presence at Pentecost when he received the Holy Spirit with the other apostles. Another common attribute is Jude holding an image of Jesus Christ, known as the image of Edessa. Among some Roman Catholics, St. Jude is venerated as the patron saint of lost causes. This practice stems from the belief that few Christians invoked him for misplaced fear of praying to Christ's betrayer, Judas Iscariot, because of their similar names. The ignored Jude thus supposedly became quite eager to assist anyone who sought his help, to the point of interceding in the most dire of circumstances. The church also wanted to encourage veneration of this forgotten apostle and maintained that St. Jude would intercede in any lost cause to prove his sanctity and zeal for Christ. St. Jude was founded by entertainer Danny Thomas on the premise that no child should die in the dawn of life. Danny Thomas was a comedian who was struggling to get a break in his career and living paycheck to paycheck. When his first child was about to be born, he attended Mass in Detroit and put his last $7 in the offering bin. He prayed to St. Jude Thaddeus for a means to provide for his family, and about a week later he obtained a gig that paid 10 times what he had put in the offering bin. After that time, Thomas believed in the power of prayer. He promised St. Jude Thaddeus that if he made him successful, he would one day build him a shrine. Years later, Thomas became an extremely successful comedian and built St. Jude Children's Research Hospital as a shrine to St. Jude Thaddeus to honor his promise. St. Jude died a martyr's death in about 65 AD. His feast day is October 28th. I'll see you next time.
I'm here today with Mark Carter, who brought us up to the belfry of St. Mary Basilica to show us this beautiful bell. Mark is the president of the St. Mary Parish Council. Now Mark, tell us something about this.
Sure, Mike. This is the bell of St. Mary Basilica. It's named the Maria Alexandretta. It was a gift of Prince Alex Torlonia of Rome. It arrived in Natchez Wednesday, May 15th, 1850, and was blessed by Bishop Chance on Sunday, May 26th of that same year.
Hi, we're in the kitchen now with Bonnie Woodward, and we're going to make everyone a special dessert that is so easy you're going to love it at home. You'll rush right out and get these ingredients. It's probably the most simple and most delightful dessert you'll ever have on your table. It is a combination of everything that everybody loves. Now Bonnie, on Wednesday nights you're usually in charge of feeding the parish for the family night dinner, correct?
That's right, Mike. We have 100 to 120 people that come and eat with us.
Every week. That is outstanding. I know that's a lot of mouths to feed, but I imagine it's also very rewarding as well.
It's very rewarding.
It helps to build community. And want to keep in mind that you are part of that community. So let's go through this. We take a basic
We
pan.
take a pan, aluminum pan. We take apple, and this I'm using the Lucky Leaf sliced apple pie filling.
But I imagine if you're a fan of peaches or blueberry or any kind of cobbler you'd like, it would work, correct?
You can use cherries, peaches, any type of fruit. All right? Next, we take any yellow cake mix and we just dump it in over the apples. Easy.
Yeah, help smooth that out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. Now some butter.
Everything's better with butter.
That's right. And a little cinnamon.
I tell you what, let's go ahead and make it extra rich and put the
Let's
whole
put all
thing
the
in
butter
there.
in on here.
And
Okay.
spread it out. Outstanding.
All right.
Even it out. Make all that goodness go everywhere.
Sounds good.
And we put it into the oven for about 45 minutes for at what temperature?
350.
Outstanding.
All right. Think the cobbler's ready? Get this beautiful cobbler.
You taste the cake, you taste the pie, you put a little ice cream on there, you have it a la mode. You know what a la mode means? Has nothing to do with ice cream. It's a French word that means in fashion. But we take anything, put French in front of it, and suddenly we think it's fancy. Well, thank you for joining us for In the Kitchen with Bonnie. We'll see you next time.
Now, Miss Sydney, start singing. You ready? Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. When we read, we begin with
ABC.
When we sing, we begin with
Do, re, mi.
do, re, mi.
Do, re, mi.
The first three notes just happen to be do, re, mi.
Do, re, mi.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Bum, 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 bum,
Do, a deer, a female deer. Re, a drop of golden sun. Me, a name I call myself. I, a long way to run. So, I need a woollen thread. Love,
I know to follow
so. Tea, a drink with jam and bread. That will bring us back to do. A deer, a female deer. Red, a drop of golden sun. Me, a name I call myself. A long way to run. So, I need a woollen thread. Love, I know to follow so. Tea, a drink with jam and bread. That will bring us back to
bum, 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 bum. So go. Freeze.
And today, we thank you again for joining us for another episode of Talk Plus. As always, we end in prayer. And to say our prayer today is Ms. Susan Davis. She was a teacher in the elementary school at Cathedral for many years. This is one of the favorite prayers of children growing up. I hope it brings back some happy memories for you. And remember, as we pray for you here at St. Mary's, please keep us in your prayers as well.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love entrusts me here, ever this day be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. Amen.